Namaste and welcome to Urban.chatterati. This is Abhinav Prakash. And today I am once again joined by Razib Khan, who is a scientist based out of America, to discuss the recent Pew Research Center report on India, which is titled Religion in India, Tolerance and Segregation. Razib, welcome again.
Hey, it's nice to be here, Abhinav.
So, Razib, what do you make out of this report? This report is basically a nightmare for all the kind of propaganda we have been seeing for the past many years in the Western media and academia about in India, which is religiously very intolerant. People are not free to practice their religion and so on. But the report gives completely different picture about India.
Yeah. The first thing you need to do, as you know, Abhinav, is all right, look at the sample sizes. How do they do their weighting and all these things? I have to say, a lot of people commented, they reached out to people in rural areas. This is not simply an urban cosmopolitan sample, which can cause some issues, obviously, in reporting. And so reweighting, what do? They reweight it to 2011 demographic data, which basically means they tried to make the outcomes representative of the population of India as a whole. I think this is Pew. They do serious work. They don't do perfect work, but nobody does. And so that's what I would, some of the criticism that I've seen online is, how can you get a representative sample with 30,000 people out of a nation of 1.4 billion or whatever? But here's the issue. As you and a lot of your viewers know, the key is to get a representative sample. As you approach a larger and larger sample size, the law of large numbers kicks in. And if you get a representative sample, then it's a good representation of the underlying true distribution, correct? So you don't need 10% of the population or something ridiculous. There's diminishing returns on a larger sample size. So this is a decent sample size for the questions that they were asking. The issue is did they weight properly? Did they get the, representative populations in the sample? So for example, let me give you an example. A question that I had, 6% of the self-identified Muslims in the sample did not believe in God. Okay. Now that's a really strange number, because how could you do that? My response is actually really straightforward. I can't see how any person of a Muslim background in India would not say that they're Muslim, because Indians routinely call me a Muslim, and I've drawn things that of Muhammad that no Indian would ever want to see. So I just don't believe that anybody of a Muslim Islamic background in the Indian subcontinent would not identify as Muslim, because no Hindu would believe that they were not Muslim. So it's you need to take into account the social context, right? And the social context is in India, religion is ethnic, So you have to just understand that it doesn't necessarily correspond to what people believe. So in general, I found the results broadly creditable, although there's going to be errors in some of the weighting and some of the representative in such a broad report.
Yeah, indeed. And what comes out very clearly is that people respect other religion, because you see the numbers are overwhelming, that people saying that respecting other religions is very important part of being truly Indian. It's a very important part of their religious identity itself. But they also are almost unanimously against inter-religious marriages. And this is something we hear a lot, especially in the Western media, the new media coverage, this love jihad and all those kind of things, that in India, interfaith marriages are being curtailed by the BJP government. But if you look at the numbers, all the religions, irrespective of the reason, whether it's north, south, east, west, everyone is against inter-religious marriages. So what do you make out of this thing? We respect each other, but we want to live different and away from each other.
Yeah. So two things. One, the Western media and the Western influenced media, I'm assuming, is looking at through their own particular normative framework of what they expect, what they believe should happen prescriptively and what they also assume descriptively. So they don't really understand the cultural context of the Indian subcontinent. Now, the flip side is Indians themselves often don't understand the cultural context of the West either. So this is not a one-way thing. But the issue is most people in the United States don't care what people in India think. So, so it doesn't really matter that Indians are making misunderstandings, right? The second thing that I would say is I don't think it's just the Western media, though, because I do follow some people on Twitter through you and Kushal Mehra, and I have to say, like, they're pretty obsessed with the love jihad. If you just followed some of these people, you would think like every third marriage of a Muslim in the subcontinent was with a Hindu woman or something. I'm exaggerating, but you know what I'm saying. So like these exceptions to the rule are extremely salient and concerning. And the reason that they're salient and concerning is the history of conversion in the Indian subcontinent and the long-term demographic patterns. But the ultimate issue with the long-term demographic patterns is not conversion. It's fertility, right? Yeah. But people don't want to make a change in their, like, if you think there should be more Hindus in the future, okay, like just going by your viewership, they're probably mostly Hindu. If you think there should be more Hindus in the future, the number one thing you can do is have more children. But with demographic transition and, trying to maintain a middle-class lifestyle, fertility has been crashing all over the subcontinent. And so I think it's easier to focus on conversion because that's not about you. Yeah. You don't have to make a change in your life. So.
But, if you look at the Muslim population in India, we have a very large number of people who said they don't believe in God. I mean, 6% is a huge number, even if we compare to the Western countries as well. But then you have this thing that most of the Muslims want Sharia codes. Again, most of the Muslims oppose triple talaq, right? And if you look at the religious beliefs, they are more in tune with their Hindu neighbors than, let's say, the Bangladesh or the Pakistan. A large number of Muslims believe in karma. Large number of Muslims believe, a significant number, I said not the majority, but a significant number believe that the God can have different manifestations.
Yeah. It's those rules were, I'm mildly shocked, but not entirely shocked. So one of the things that the cross-cultural literature on religious ethnography shows that people have an external identity and a surface understanding of their religion at a high level, but a lot of their interior or like day-to-day understanding is strongly culturally shaped. So to give a concrete example, if you compare Protestants and Catholics in the United States, you see Catholics have very similar understanding of Christianity to Protestants. Mm. But that's because they were raised in a country that's historically Protestant, that's majority Protestant. So Protestant conceptions of what religion is and what Christianity is have shaped American Catholics. This is a problem for Catholics in other countries where they come to the United States and like, you guys practice kind of weird. And it's because they have a Protestant mentality. Now, with Indian Muslims, I was actually kind of shocked, though, that like they have pretty much the same belief in karma as Hindus. So what is karma to you guys? What is karma to you? Because maybe they think of it as some sort of generic, because I think of karma as a dharmic concept. But it can also be kind of like good karma, bad karma. We use it now in the United States colloquially too. So what is karma to you? Because maybe I don't understand why they just are so accepting of this idea.
No, because karma is a very, let's say, the Hindu and a Buddhist concept, which basically says whatever you do in this life will get accumulated, and then you reap the reward, you face the consequences in the next life as well. So karma is a very specific doctrine, right?
Yeah, and that was my understanding, and yet I believe, going off memory, 77% of surveyed Muslims said yes, they believe in karma, but only 21% believe in reincarnation. Now, that percentage who believe in reincarnation is very similar to American Christians, actually. So I think that there's like a minority of there's a group of people in society that are always have this idea of reincarnation. Reincarnation has existed outside of Indian cultures. Some of the Greeks believed in reincarnation, and the Celts in Northwest Europe also believed in reincarnation. So I don't want to say common sense, but it's an idea that's out there in the world, right? Yep. But you go from 77% to I believe 21%, going off memory, 22%. And so I would be curious to do follow-up interviews with the Muslims that believe in karma, but don't believe in reincarnation. How does that work? Now, you might say that's illogical, but that's fine. The human brain is illogical. There are Muslims in these surveys that are kind of saying they're not Muslim monotheists. So that's just the word, but that is how humans are. They don't fit into your like hyper intellectual boxes. And so we as intellectuals actually also need to acknowledge that. Like, humans are humans. We don't design them. They design themselves. And so you can't fit the world into your own preconceived conceptual categories in an empirical science. You need to let the distribution of outcomes and beliefs affect you. And so that is how I take these results in terms of something surprised me, but this was a known unknown. There are always surprises like this in these survey data that come out. I do think, I do want to emphasize, because you kind of implied it and said it, Muslims in India, and there's many of them in India as now they're in Pakistan and more than in Bangladesh, seem to align a lot with the Hindu majority on a lot of things in relation to those in other. And also, why does everyone in Pakistan believe in the evil eye? That was weird. I mean, if you see that, 61% of Pakistanis believe in the evil eye. Like, what? Like, what is the evil eye? I thought that was Sicilian grandmas, But anyway, I mean, It's just like everyone in Pakistan. I mean, like, what are people in Pakistan doing? Are they staring at each other weird all the time? I don't know. Anyway. There are some results in there that were cross-cultural where it's like, I wonder if they're like terms, the way the survey data was, but you can only take that so far.
Yeah. But there are other interesting results which also break some stereotype, which says that the caste discrimination in South is more than the North. And this is something we often hear in reverse, that North is much more backward socially and more casteist. South is very progressive because of different movements, like Dravidian movements and all. But the number says that the people say the caste discrimination is greater in the South. But when it comes to intercaste marriage, the people are more ready for intercaste marriage, at least in the survey, in the South than in the North. And then again, interestingly, the Muslims are more resistant towards the intercaste marriage than the Hindus. So it's a mess up, right? It does not fit any neat theory or let's say whatever the social science or the common sense which is there in the academia tells us.
Yeah, so this is why you do the survey. This is why you do empirical research, because it will break your theoretical expectations. So here's a hypothesis or a conjecture for why there's more perception in the South of both of these things, or of caste discrimination. If interaction between different castes is greater, there's going to be more friction potentially. If there is more intercaste marriage or more acceptance of intercaste marriage, there's going to be perception of more discrimination, right? So, in the United States, there are some parts of the country that are extremely liberal and racially progressive, but there are no non-whites. There are other parts of the country where racial tensions exist because they're non-whites, So I think one of the issues that you might be seeing in the North and in the center, the Gangetic Plain, so their central is basically the Gangetic Plain, right? The heart of Indian culture historically, is I think that there is an equilibrium or modus vivendi of the different groups there. And there's some sort of metastable equilibrium. The South, on the other hand, these big cities like Bangalore and Mumbai in particular, I think they're having and I don't know, Mumbai is not South. I don't want people to get offended because I know this, they don't want to. But anyway, like Bangalore, Hyderabad, but also Mumbai, which I think has a, effect there. I think they're changing the culture, and there seems to be a consistent pattern that the southern part of the subcontinent is less religious, less nationalistic, just less traditionalistic. And if you look at the data, this applies across religions. So Muslims...
Let me interrupt you there, because that is a theoretical view you hear. But in my personal experience, I find South Indian society is much more traditional, much more religious, and they have very strong views about nationalism. In North is much more diluted. No, yeah, please continue.
Okay. But I mean, but that was your experience. But what we saw in the survey was the opposite, right? At least what people said, right? Like, I mean, would you agree with that though, in terms of national and religious identity that the South
very strong, very strong in South. They're far more traditional than the North Indian families.
Okay. So you think that the perception is the opposite. Your perception is the opposite.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but be as that may be, there's also the difference with Hindi. That was one thing that I observed, which intuitively about, but basically the connection with Hindi identity, Hindi language speech, and Indian identity is much more clear outside of the South. I mean, to some extent, the central, the Gangetic Plain, it's strongest, but really the big gap is south versus everybody else, the four southern states versus everyone else. And so I think that was interesting. I think that's going to cause a long-term issue. I have been in situations where I've known of people with even Hindu nationalist sympathies from Tamil Nadu who get kind of agitated with the Hindi issue, and I think that's going to cause a long-term problem. So yeah. I think that structurally, I think there might be a situation where promoting a Hindu identity as like the religious core of the nation is less polarizing than a linguistic identity at the same time. Even though obviously people in the North are connecting the two as one and of the same, I think they're qualitatively different.
But if you look at, it's not really the North, it's the central India, which is more pro-Hindi, which does not see a distinction between being an Indian and speaking Hindi. North India is not like that. This is North India because you have Punjab and other states.
That's fair.
They have their own local culture. But it also comes out that India is a very, very nationalistic country.
I saw that.
It's very strong across the religion, across the reason, across the caste. What does it tell you about the politics of India, of the left? Because they are trying to copy the Western model where nationalism is evil, is toxic nationalism, toxic masculinity. But in India, the numbers are not the same. It's completely opposite.
Yeah. So what I would say is part of the problem that we've talked about on this on your show before, I think, is the Indian left, a subset of the elite Indian left, has become absorbed in an adjunct to the Western left. And so they're not really interested in influence and electoral politics within India. They're interested in influence within like the broader Western matrix. And so I think they're going to marginalize themselves electorally because all religions, all communities in these data are nationalistic, which is not surprising, knowing Indians. Personally, I have seen a fair amount of nationalism, just reflexive nationalism. And when I don't mean reflexive in a negative way, I'm just saying like that's your default hypothesis. Like people are proud of being Indian. They're proud of what India has accomplished. They're proud of their culture. They associate with the Indian nation. And that's definitely not, it's obviously not, if you have a nation and your people are not proud of your nation, you got a problem with that nation in terms of maintaining the project. So in a way, it's optimistic for India in terms of, okay, so people have a shared national identity. There's the religious tension here, but at least by the survey, Indian Muslims are quite patriotic as well. And so, okay, you have disagreements, but you have a basis and a foundation for future national identity and coherence around this shared affinity. As far as the Indian left goes, I think the fundamental issue, which we alluded to in earlier podcasts, is that their peers or the peers that they want is the Western cultural elite and intelligentsia, kind of like this global English-speaking intelligentsia that they want to be part of, which, it can be very lucrative and it can give them a lot of publicity and attention in the West, but it arguably marginalizes them in India. And maybe they're okay with it. It's a trade-off they're willing to make. But it is a trade-off that's happening. And privately, there are people that will admit that in terms of I have friends who are anti-Hindu nationalists, I would say, in academia who are from India. And they just admit that they're never going to win an election again, at least not in their lifetimes. They're just aware that their views are minority.
In the survey, you see the Hindu nationalists are also the strongest supporter of the diversity.
Mm-hmm.
How does it fits into this view that Hindu nationalism is this homogenizing project and this thing? Because what I have been arguing, and I've argued many a time, that Hindu nationalists in India, that's a spectrum of Hindu nationalists, so we can't speak for everyone, but the mainstream Hindu nationalism sees itself as the guardian of the diversity of India. It does not want to become Pakistan, basically. Let's be very frank, because they say that Pakistan has become completely homogeneous. There is no diversity there, not just religion-wise, but also in other aspect, the language-wise, another thing. So Hindu nationalism is very, very determined that we don't want to become Pakistan. We want to be diverse. So how does it fit into this overall narrative about Hindu fascism?
Well, I think the issue that you're alluding to is the nature of what Hinduism is. Hinduism has baked into it this integrity within diversity, correct? You have these different communities, the different jatis, you have Varna, you have all these specializations, all of these locations within the social matrix for diversity and variation, local gods, maybe you're devoted to Vishnu or Shiva, all of this, it's just part of the system, right? And also Hindu intellectuals have traditionally been very, very open to and promoting a perennialism, which argues that there's multiple paths to God and the divine and salvation. And so, of course, like a forthright embrace of Hindu nationalism, of like Hinduism as a cultural entity has within it, in its priors, this idea that their diversity is always going to exist within the broader framework. So the frame sets the limits, and then within the frame, there's variation. So in the survey, they're basically saying you can't, like something like 80% of the Hindus said that you cannot, eat beef and be a Hindu, right? That's the frame. Like no beef Hindus, no beef Hindus, or at least outside of the South. Okay, like no hate on the Kerala people, and I love beef myself, so but no beef Hindus. But then within the frame, there's no stipulation on like a lot of other things. You could be a vegetarian, you could be a non-vegetarian. So I think that that's part of the cultural orientation. Now, in contrast, obviously, within Christianity, there's been the traditional opinion. Well, I mean, it starts out, all nations shall bend the knee before, Jesus Christ. So that's their frame, right? So there's that frame where it's like there's a certain way to be Christian, certain way to be Muslim, a certain way to be a liberal Western person. I mean, to be frank, the West has an ideology or rhetoric of diversity, but the reality is there's only so, for example, as a non-white person in the West, you're diverse, but if you express opinions that are at variance with white liberal elite, you're a white supremacist. So, I mean, their diversity is just rhetorical. Let's be entirely frank. Their diversity is about color, not opinion, not practice, not views. Okay. I'm being a little hyperbolic, but not really. I've experienced this myself. So I think that part of the result, or that part of the survey, it made sense to me in terms of Indian self-conception, Hindu self-conception. I was surprised to see that a lot of this had rubbed off on the Muslims too, though. I mean, there were some things where it was like, the Muslims tend to be more exclusive in their understanding of their religion, but there are a lot of other things where like something like 20% of the Muslims said to be Hindu is to be Indian. Which is like, there was just a lot of interesting, funny results in there, but I don't think it's because of the survey problems. I think a lot of it is because people never fit into the boxes that you put them into when you ask them. And this is a common issue with surveys, you probably know.
Exactly. And the dietary restrictions are very important for Indians because majority of the Hindus agree that beef eating is strict no-no. Majority of the Muslims say pork eating is strict no-no. And let's not forget that 1857 happened because of the beef and the pork, right? It was sparked by the dietary habit. But that said, how do you see the caste issue evolving? Because it's a very complex thing. Majority of the Dalits and the tribals and the OBCs say that they don't feel caste discrimination. They're very upfront. Data is very clear on that. But when you see the data in much more detail, the backward caste or the Shudras are more likely to display casteist tendencies than the upper castes. How does what's happening out there? If you can make sense from an outsider's perspective, how do you see it?
My intuition would be that if you did a regression analysis, a lot of the differences would disappear due to socioeconomics. So like, let's say you're a Brahmin. I mean, it's in the data, something like 10% of their college-educated sample was Brahmin. 4% of the Indians surveyed were Brahmin. And I think they just estimated based on the data that about 4% of Indians are Brahmin, which seems about right to me. And so you're Brahmin, they're more likely to be college-educated, more likely to be professional. As you know, when you're a professional, a symbolic analyst, you tend to interact with a wider diverse array of people outside of your own communal social network. And so I think some of what you're seeing here is if you're an OBC and you're in a more traditionalist cultural context, you rely more on these communal institutions. I mean, this is really the reason that like all of the different Indian groups, I think, on the whole, like they have mostly friends within their own caste. I was actually a little surprised even that among Jains and Sikhs, maybe especially Jains because they're small numbers, that most friends, like it's not shocking that almost all the friends of Hindus are Hindus in India. 80% of people are Hindus, right? But like less than 1% of Indians are Jain. And yet even then they say most of their friends are Jain. But here's the rub. If most Indians have mostly friends from the same jati, from the same community, which seems to be true in these results, well, Jains themselves have jati, right? So they're Jain Brahmins, they're Jain Baniyas. And so if they're just hanging out with like people from their own Jain jati, then you're confounding the religion with the community, right? And so, I mean, I think that's one of the subtle issues here in these data where they're descriptive data without crosstabs, where it's like, okay, how much of the variance can be explained by religion and how much of the variance can be explained by the fact that a community, by definition, almost always in a subcontinent, is of a particular religion. So it may be that the religious data, the religious results, are almost entirely explicable by the communal results.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. But let's say, what does it tell, or let's say what picture it paints about India? Because this is the first time we have this kind of study. Frankly speaking, it's social sciences in India or about India hardly do any any empirical study. They're all based on assumptions, theories, preaching, same old kind of thing. So there's this professor in America in Brown University. He was there. He's an Indian American, and he was there in India. I heard him. So he was saying that India is becoming an ethnic democracy, and India is becoming more like Pakistan, more like Turkey, or more like Israel, which are ethnic democracies. But India will be really worse off because India is a Hindu majority country, and Hinduism is this very discriminatory religion. So India will be very worse off, right? So we have those kind of things without any backing of empirical data. But let's say, what broad picture of India this survey paints in conclusion?
I mean, I think, my own impression from the survey is India is a lot less polarized than a lot of people would think. It's a lot less, it's very divided, like in terms of social networks and caste, and that's kind of something we knew. But in terms of people's perception and attitudes towards it, they have the divisions that they want, and then they're unified by kind of a pluralistic outlook. Which, from a Hindu nationalist background, in some ways, I guess that's kind of the best of all worlds, right? Like you have this Hindu, like I do think that caste and jati, like 200-300 years from now, I think it's going to be a minority thing for Indians. I think this is like a temporary transient, to be entirely frank. Looking at the intermarriage rates, they're just too high to sustain. But right now, the old ways of jati varna are still around in modern day India, but it's also integrated within a modernist framework. So I think in some of our conversations, I've said, like, Indians need to be more forward thinking. And I have to say, looking at this, there's a lot more forward than maybe I would have thought. Okay. I mean, like, the fact that the Muslims and the Hindus don't differ on a lot of things. Indian Muslims seem quite chauvinistic as Indian nationalists. And I'm not saying that in a pejorative way. Like I frankly would have thought that they would be, I'm not gonna lie, I thought they'd be less patriotic in light of like the communal tensions, but it seems like they really are, they really do perceive themselves differently from Muslims in Pakistan or Muslims in Bangladesh. Also, what's up with you guys in cricket? There's stuff in there about how to be an Indian, you have to like cricket. Like that was weird. It's just me. Like what? I mean, I don't even know anything about this, it's just like, I mean, come on, it's a complicated game. Like, why do you have to like cricket?
I don't know. I haven't watched a single cricket match since I was in class 9th or 10th high school.
Okay, see, there you go. So you understand why I'm confused. Like, it was in there. I'm like, wait, you had a question about cricket? Like, that's weird.
Cricket nationalism. Also,
yeah.
So that's a very interesting report, and I think we have to read a lot more in this report. That has to be verified with more studies, but this is a very interesting thing, and I would say lots of things which have come out. I'm not surprised because this is how India is. We live in India, so we can understand well. Nothing surprising in this view.
So you're saying you expected these results?
Most of them, yeah.
Okay.
I was a bit surprised that that lots of Muslims believe in the ideas which are not strictly Islamic. That was a surprise, but I think this is how the real people are on the ground, right? Religion is not as clearly defined for the majority of the people that we otherwise like to imagine. That's
Exactly.
an interesting point. That Shiva is the most worshipped god in India among the Hindus. So,
Well, I was not surprised by that. I've read that he is the most popular. But.
yeah, he is more popular, especially among the younger people. And this is something I'm not surprised because you see that everywhere, right? So he has become this cool god. Lots of tracks will get triggered. How you're saying the god is cool, but yeah, in the popular perception of the younger generation, Shiva is the cool god.
Shiva's your best friend.
Shiva is your best friend. Okay, but thanks a lot, Razib, for your time.
That's great.
Wonderful discussion. See you soon again.
All right. Later, guys.
And thank you, audience, for listening to us. Please do read the report so that you can, even if you want to criticize it, you have to read the report first. But thanks for watching and hoping to see you soon. Please subscribe to the channel and join as a member to support the channel. Thank you.